Yeah. Oh, yeah. I got some questions to ask you about you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Mikasa Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Finn. This is take two of our attempt to record this podcast as some internet issues happened, but I'm joined here by guest Hali Hetz. She is the editor-in-chief of thegristledvet.com. She was an intern for the Erie Otters junior hockey team, as well as she covering them for the hockeywriters.com. Thank you for joining me today, Hali. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm good. Hopefully the internet holds it down this time. So the point of bringing Hali on the show today, guys, is because I'm not a big hockey guy. I want to bring in somebody to kind of teach me a little bit about the league, NHL as a league, what's happening, the big news, the big stories going on, because there is a big one. And then, kind of answer my questions about hockey from a non-fan and maybe answer some of your guys' questions. So we were talking before our first podcast cut out about the Erie Otters. This is a junior hockey league team, junior hockey league of the OHL. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about the development. Once again, we were talking about some of the American sports are very based on high school to college to draft to go. But that normally means guys aren't going pro until 22, 23 years old. Mm-hmm. Whereas in other leagues like soccer, you have guys that are going pro whenever they're ready. We've got 16-year-old pros. We've got 30-year-old pros. But they're built through farm systems within youth academies. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about what is hockey like with their developmental leagues? Is it truly a developmental league to get guys up into the pro rankings, kind of like the MLB has with AA, AAA? Or is it kind of the same process of high school, college, draft, go? So how does it kind of work?
Yeah, well, for hockey, there's so many different leagues in hockey. It's kind of crazy. But the OHL actually sort of touts itself as the premier developmental league for guys who are trying to get into the NHL. That's sort of their end game. And because there's a route you could take where you could go, play college, play D1 NCAA college. And a lot of guys do. That's sort of becoming like a trend where guys will go play college and then they'll end up getting drafted from there because you're eligible for the NHL draft when you're 18 years old. Okay. And to get into the OHL, though, it's usually 16, but you can be granted what's called exceptional player status. And so that would enable you to go play for a team in the OHL when you're 15, which only a couple guys have done. I think the last was obviously Connor McDavid and John Tavares from the Islanders, where they're playing when they're 15, and most guys aren't allowed to do that, but they're so good and so far above everyone that league decided that they were good to go for that. Okay,
and they get a pro status. They're being paid at that point?
No, for the Ontario Hockey League, no. They get like a stipend, like a monthly stipend, and that's more so their families don't have to pay for them to get food and stuff. They live with billet families, but they don't. Did I lose you again?
Here, sorry, we got cut out, guys, but we are back. So you were talking about the developmental hockey league, and we talked about, are these guys pro? You said they're working on a stipend and they're living with billet families. Is that what you were saying?
Yep.
And that's essentially just kind of housing with certain volunteer families for these leagues. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, that's exactly how it works.
Got you. Are they going to school at this time? Is it just kind of being homeschooled, or is it through the teams that they're playing with? How does that work?
Yeah, well, a lot of them, they're high school age, so they are in high school. And some of them, a lot of times they'd go to like an area high school, like a local area high school, okay, and still be going to class, but then have to leave class and go for their morning skate at 10 a.m., So that kind of got a little bit in the way. So a lot of them actually are schooled online now.
Oh, okay.
Like a cyber school deal, because it's just a lot easier that way rather than, some of the guys, I had a friend who went to high school at McDowell, which is where a lot of them went to in Erie for the Otters. And he said, the guys would come back and they'd just be like passed out on their desks asleep because they played hockey all night and had a morning skate and just had no energy whatsoever. So.
Right. So I like the whole going pro at 18. I'm a big fan of that, especially because you're putting your body on the line. So it's kind of like you got to get paid while you can get paid kind of deal.
Hockey's a really physical sport too. So a lot of guys beats you up.
Really? Yeah. Now, is CTE kind of a big thing in hockey as it is in other sports? I know football is the big CTE thing. Obviously, boxing and MMA. Is it kind of something that's circled around hockey, and is it kind of stopping parents from having their kids play, or is it just kind of like, risk reward kind of deal?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a factor, and it's almost something that guys don't really want to talk about too, I feel like.
Right.
But it's lesser covered than football, I would say. But there's still, I mean, that's what the league has, their concussion protocols and everything, where if a guy gets a bad hit, then they have to go take him back and test them, make sure that they're not showing signs of a concussion before they okay him to go back in. And there's a whole, process and protocol with that the league takes seriously, because it's, your head, that's something that's important.
Right.
But yeah, I wouldn't say that it's, to the level that football is, even though it's kind of like you are playing football, but you're going even faster on ice, on skates, and, harder hits.
Right.
So it's something to think about for sure.
And the surface you're hitting is a lot harder.
Yeah.
Yeah, like one of the big things is the grass, the turf is naturally going to be softer than hard ice, or even if you, like I said, MMA is another thing that used to be done on basketball courts. Imagine just, getting hit, knocked out, and landing back of your head on a court. But very interesting. Would you consider, would they say OHL is kind of more important to get into than versus a D1 college program, or where are scouts looking more? Are they looking at the college guys, or are they looking at these developmental league guys?
Well, both. They're kind of really in competition with each other, especially nowadays. But you do, a lot of times you can lose your eligibility to play NCAA if you take the juniors route and, play in the Ontario Hockey League. Then you're not going to be able to go back and play NCAA for college. But the reverse is not true. You can play some college hockey and then decide you don't like it and go play for the juniors in the Ontario Hockey League, for example. We had a guy, Owen Hedrick, did that. I think he played for St. Cloud for 2 years, and then we ended up getting him in the Ontario Hockey League. But he can't now go back and play NCAA hockey for a college.
Right. And you mentioned that you went to the University of Pittsburgh, which is not a D1 team, but they're a club team. I went to Liberty University. That's another club team hockey, at least when I was there back in 2011. So what is it just these schools just happen to not have big programs? So is it pretty normal for teams to not have D1 schools? Because I've seen, anytime I watch the hockey national championships, it's always obscure schools. It's very similar to volleyball, where I think it's North Dakota State has a crazy hockey team or something like that.
Oklahoma too is for the club teams, believe it or not. Central Oklahoma is a huge ACHA club hockey sport or school right there. And they get a lot of guys coming in from Canada and Europe to play there, because they're a huge school. And in their national tournament that they have every year, which this year is in Columbus, Ohio, is the ACHA national tournament. And I mean, they're regulars there. They're there every year. And Pitt has it was a feat to get there last year. It was their first time there, and they made it again this year. And they didn't get past the first round, but it was crazy just to be there, because there's so many schools that have these club hockey teams, because their university, doesn't offer the NCAA D1 team. So that's something that, they maybe couldn't get it. Even guys who played juniors and maybe weren't, top six, and they're kind of the lower level junior players, then go to play club hockey. So, yeah.
Interesting. It's just, the big things with the NCAA from a football, basketball standpoint, it's just that guys aren't being compensated and they're putting their bodies on the line, and it's just real tough for them. Yeah. So it's good to see that hockey has alternative routes that are realistic. Because right now there aren't really too many alternative routes for, say, basketball. These guys can now go over to if they want to play in Spain, Turkey, and different Euro leagues and stuff like that. And you might get exposure, especially recently. There's been a lot of guys that are getting drafted out of Europe, but it's tough. If you want to the biggest platform to be, for college basketball players is the NCAA tournament and NCAA basketball. So it's good to see hockey has kind of workarounds. And I think my first thoughts on that is just because hockey isn't primarily an American sport. And so these college teams, are there Canadian D1 teams, or are there are no Canadian colleges involved with NCAA hockey at all? And that's all the Ontario Hockey League and stuff like that.
A lot of times it's going to be the junior teams. Not to say there's not, Canadian colleges who are doing the same thing, but NCAA, it's it's mostly that's an American thing. It's like
Right.
and everything. So
Gotcha. So the big thing, and one of the big things I wanted you to come on and kind of explain to me, has been this this expansion team, the Vegas Golden Knights.
oh yeah.
So how many teams prior to them were actually in the NHL?
30.
So now it's up to 31. Okay, so kind of run me through and the viewers here through what the expansion draft entails. I mean, how do they go about a boot? I think I should say a boot for the
How do I go about it?
How do they go about it? How do they go about getting their players? How do players protect certain? Do teams have an ability to protect certain players on their team from being drafted? Is there for the upcoming draft for those guys? Are they given maybe extra picks to help fill the roster? How does filling the roster go? And then from there, we'll kind of talk about their season and how they got to where they're at.
Yeah, sure. Well, there's a ton of little rules that go into that. But this expansion draft with Vegas is a little bit different than maybe the older ones. And, teams weren't able to protect as many players.
Okay.
And they have a lot of, little specifics. Like I know they had – this time around with Vegas, they had, 2 different options for players that they wanted to protect in the expansion draft. And it went, you could have 7 forwards, 3 defensemen, 1 goalie was the first option. And then your second option – was 8 skaters and 1 goaltender. And the 8 skaters could be comprised of, all forwards or all defensemen. It didn't matter. Mm-hmm. So those were your 2 routes that you could go. So before, there wasn't anything that stipulated by position to protect players. It was more just like you can protect a list of players and it doesn't have to be certain forward, defenseman, goalie, whatever else. So that's sort of, I feel like that kind of gave teams a little bit of a harder time maybe this time in figuring out what they're going to do and who they're going to protect and at what cost.
Right. And then at that point, once you've protected your certain amount of people, in Vegas just kind of grab who they want to grab, or are there limitations for how many people they can grab from a certain team?
Yeah, well, I think there's allowed to take 1 player from each team to populate their roster, but a lot of teams sort of cut deals with them beforehand. Like I know the Penguins did that. Because they obviously got their goaltender Marc-Andre Fleury from the Penguins. The Pens had, it was Matt Murray and Marc-Andre Fleury were their 2 guys in net. And Murray was the young kid that just won the Stanley Cup, and that was sort of their goaltender of the future. And so they wanted to protect him. They didn't want to get rid of him. And they figured they could maybe cut their losses and get a bit of a salary cap dump in offering VGK, Fleury instead. And I believe they had to do, offer up a second round pick or something in order to do that. It was a whole big thing. But yeah, they basically said, you take Marc-Andre Fleury, we'll have him, waive his no move clause as long as we get to keep Murray, because they couldn't protect both of the goaltenders. It was one or the other.
Right. Okay. Makes sense. And salary cap is a good thing, especially, I don't know how often teams in hockey are rotating a guy like a keeper, how many games in a season are there even roughly? Is it, we're all over the place. NBA 82, give or take. So sorry. So is a lot of rotation per se for those guys?
For the NHL 82, yeah. Oh, hold on. Internet.
You get me?
Yeah, there's 82 in the regular season for the NHL.
Got you. So you see a lot of rotation amongst goalkeepers and different players. I know hockey's a real big rotation-based sport from the 1 or 2 games I've gone to over my life. How big are the rosters? I know, one person from each team, give or take, will give you about 30, but how big is a standard hockey roster?
Yeah, somewhere around there. That's the thing, is a lot of them can come up from the AHL, which is like their farm team.
Right.
And so they can sort of pull guys up, and there's a whole other stipulations that go along with that. Like, they can have an entry-level NHL contract, and they can only play a certain X amount of games in the AHL in order to be available, and yada, yada.
Right.
But a lot of teams do sort of have that ability to pull up guys from the AHL, from their farm teams. And the AHL is the American Hockey League.
Right.
For the Penguins, we have Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, Baby Pens. And so we'll pull guys up from there when someone gets injured, and that'll fill the spot in the roster. And so there's, 30 guys or so technically on that roster, but it can cycle between quite a few more guys than just 30, and that's it.
Right. Okay. Cool. So this Vegas Golden Knights team, their expansion draft, they grab players. Speaking of the expansion draft, what about the regular draft for hockey? Once again, I have to go off of my comparisons to other sports, right? Because I don't know anything, right? The NFL, you got 7 rounds, and every round counts. You know, there's a realistic chance at hitting because there's just a lot of talent for football. Basketball, there's 2 rounds. And if you're not picking out of the top 5, people normally just kind of go, all right. If it's not a top 5 pick, it's the dude may not even make the roster, you know, because there's the superstars and then that's that. And it's a lot harder to make the NBA as a young guy because there's only 12 to 13 spots on a team, or actually, I don't even know. And that's the sport I'm supposed to know. But the whole point is you have to beat out vets that have played the game for a long time. So it's a lot harder to make the roster. And then baseball's got like 30-something rounds where guys just get drafted because they played quarterback in high school and have strong arms. So how does the hockey draft work? And then what is the realistic, if I'm a hockey draftee, if I'm, you know, a college kid or whatever, is it just like if you're not drafted in the first couple rounds, you're a bust? Or is it kind of like there's actual depth within the draft and you can really kind of find stars?
Yeah, well, that's the thing is, like I was saying, how there's so many leagues in hockey where there's a ton of depth, where there's guys that, I mean, yeah, the NHL entry draft is like, that's the premier draft for getting into the NHL, of course. And there's 7 rounds of that. And, I mean, you'll see guys in the 1st through 3rd rounds who are probably definitely going to make the team. And but there's still guys that, you know, are sort of drafted way down there and they may not ever play a game in their life, or they may end up being a huge sensation. That's sort of like, whenever you come into your own, really.
Right.
But I mean, that's the other thing too, is like, you can be signed as a free agent. And a lot of guys have like really, like there's been some, I think Chris Kunitz, who played for the Penguins, was a free agent and he just sort of walked on and ended up being one of our best guys.
Gotcha. I mean, there's a lot of talent. Yeah. I mean, I would imagine you're spanning almost 2 continents, more.
Right.
Is there much of an international?
Oh yeah.
Because we international, but there are a lot of international guys that play. I mean, Russia has a huge hockey, right?
Russia, Sweden, Finland, a couple of guys from Germany.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of like, there's a big European market. And I mean, even like, you know, Henrik Zetterberg, who was from Sweden, played for Detroit Red Wings. He was drafted 210th overall and was one of their stars.
Right.
So, yeah.
Gotcha. So you can essentially you can find some, I guess, diamonds in the rough late in the draft. That's good.
Oh. Yeah.
I've always wondered. So this Vegas Golden Knights team, not a lot of teams expect expansion draft teams to go anywhere. I mean, the quickest I've ever seen would probably be the Panthers and Jaguars in the NFL. Both of those teams were fighting for like deep in the playoffs. I think their 2nd year within their tenure. But the Vegas Golden Knights have made it to the finals. My question to you, and I know you didn't really cover the Vegas Golden Knights, so sorry if I get too in depth, but what is it about making this team work? From an outsider, I think you're getting probably the 8th best guy from each team per se. I don't know what 8th best means. I don't know if these guys are, I figured you kind of get to pick and choose. So you get to grab what role players you want, what scorers you want, what kind of different, trust me, I don't know anything about hockey strategy. So you go ahead, feel free to shred me, but how did it make it work? Was it good coaching? Is it just getting a bunch of guys that got together and mesh extremely well? Was it luck? I mean, there's not a lot of luck involved to get to the Stanley Cup finals, but how did they find success, you know?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times it does just come down to luck. Like, if you look at the Winnipeg Jets, I mean, everyone pretty much thought they were a shoo-in to win the Stanley Cup, and of course, Vegas ended up beating them in 5 games in the round. So, I mean, yeah, and if you played that series over again, you never know. I mean, I'm sure the Winnipeg Jets would win at least half of that, if not more. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it I think came down to George McPhee, who's the GM, and he clearly knew what he was doing. I mean, there's so many, you can speculate for days on why the Vegas Knights are so good.
Right.
And you can't really chalk that up to luck because they've been good kind of since day one. Really? And like, you looked at that team when it was drafted and you were sort of like, oh, you know, not bad. like probably could have been better, and you might have even thought they were, trying to be good in the future and sort of get assets and get guys that would end up making them a better team in the future. And I mean, that's what I thought when I saw some of the guys that were drafting, some guys I've never even heard of. But no, clearly they have a system working.
Mm-hmm.
And I think McPhee as the GM he gets a lot of credit for that. And I know their owner said recently that their success was based on team mentality on and off the ice.
Okay.
I think that it's sort of like that band of misfits mentality where the teams that they were on didn't want them, and then they found a home in Vegas and all decided they were going to, work together and work their butts off and do really well and do some big things.
Right. I think, once again, kind of speculation, I think a huge pressure is off their shoulders from day one. That's what I would think. You're an expansion team. Nobody's job is on the line unless it seriously crashes and burns. From a player perspective, if you come in and it doesn't work, everybody and their mom is going to say, it's the first year after an expansion draft. So that pressure is gone from coaching, from GM down. So that's why, maybe that contributed as well. It's just like, there's no expectations for this team. So let's just go play. Let's have fun. Let's not stress about getting every single win every single night. And then they start flowing together. You start meshing well. So that's good to see. Do you happen to know the odds for them to win or at least get to the finals? I was trying to look it up while you were talking, but I didn't want to be rude by just staring at my phone.
I think they're the favorites actually, but at the beginning of the season, I'm pretty sure it was like 500-1 odds.
It was actually. I just put it up. The Vegas Golden Knights wants 500-1 odds. That's crazy. That is. Yeah. I think Conor McGregor had a better chance of beating Floyd Mayweather than.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Vegas. I was interested in that because I'm going to take a segue away from hockey really quick. I'm going to tell you about Leicester City. You ever heard of Leicester City?
Yeah, in the Premier League.
Okay, so you are familiar, soccer fan there. So for those of you guys who don't know, Leicester City is a soccer team that was, I think they've started as far back as the 5th league down. So within soccer, there's different leagues. You may know about the main team, the first team, but there's just multiple leagues for each team down. And pretty much at the end of every season, the 3 worst teams in the Premier League, the main league, and the 3 best teams in the league under. Why am I doing a visualization? I don't know. The 3 best teams in one league and the 3 worst teams in the other will swap. So if you finish bottom 3 in your division, you can drop down and have to play against inferior teams, not be in the national spotlight, and you might lose some players that don't want to be playing on that kind of team. So you could basically work your way – divisions. That's what it's called, not leagues, divisions. So anyway, working your way up the division every year by finishing in the top. So Leicester City just not too long ago was down in the 5th division, worked their way up. They grabbed a guy named Jamie Vardy who was playing in the 5th division. He was playing on like Wednesdays where he was working all night on a factory. It was like a Wednesday league. And that was it. Like it was like a local city team, 5th division, working at a factory all the time. He was like in his mid-20s at this point, just kind of not a nobody soccer player. Latches onto this Leicester City team. They play up. And they finally get to the Premier League. And then they're fighting that. They call it relegation if you finish in the bottom 3. And then I'll try and keep this short here and get back to hockey. But the funny thing is I think one of the players on the team got caught in Thailand having an orgy and said some racist remarks to a
no
hooker.
way.
Yeah, they said a racist remark to a hooker. Something happened and the management got fired. It was a big old scandal. They bring in this guy that coached for Chelsea, a big Premier League team, a couple years back that was kind of a whatever guy. And once again, kind of same thing. It's just a bunch of guys that nobody really knew about, kind of cast-offs from other teams. This Jamie Vardy, this striker that has just kind of he's just a Wednesday afternoon striker, whatever. And a manager that, he's not he's a world-class manager, don't get me wrong, but, there was no expectations. And then they come out, they start winning games, and they're at the top of the league. And then they lose one, and everybody's like, all right, cool. Now they're going to start losing. And then they just keep winning. You lose me? No, you got me. All right, cool. So they keep winning and winning. And the big thing in soccer is there is no playoffs. And so pretty much if you get a win, you get 3 points. If you get a tie, you get 1 point. And if you lose, you get 0 points. At the end of the season, whoever has the most points wins. Mm-hmm. That's pretty much it. There's no playoffs. So my question, all of that chunk to lead up to this, were the Vegas Knights a team at the end of the season going into the playoffs that they saw as a top team? Or at least up there with a real shot, or are they kind of like, say, a football team that goes 9-7, makes the playoffs, and then goes on a crazy playoff run? Like, how did it work for them to get to the Stanley Cup Finals?
Yeah, sure. I think it's maybe a little bit of both, where obviously at the beginning of the year, no one expected anything from them, and then they started doing really well.
Right.
And, Fleury was sort of the backbone of that team, and he was injured for a large portion of the regular season. Okay. And they had like 4 different goalies come in and stand on their heads and do amazing things. Like I know Oscar Dance played a couple games for them before he got injured, and he played for the Otters also actually just a couple years ago and was part of their championship team, I believe. But he came in, got his first win, and then next game got like his first shutout and was just doing crazy things. And he got injured, so everyone's like, well, Vegas is pretty good on the back end there. They got some great goaltending. But by the end of it, with Fleury back, and Fleury was, getting hot right at a good time going into the playoffs there. And I think people were like, yeah, they might have a shot, but they still expected a team like, the Kings, even who they played in the first round, for them to give them a run for their money. Right. And Vegas obviously ended up sweeping them in the series, and the Kings didn't even get a single win out of that. So that was sort of shocking a little bit, I think. Everyone was like, that's interesting, and our brackets are messed up now.
Is that a big thing? Is that a big thing? Hockey brackets and betting?
Yeah, everyone loves doing that. I mean, my bracket was pretty messed up after that too. And I know everyone had Winnipeg going far, and I think that was sort of the shocking point is when they beat Winnipeg in 5 games, where Winnipeg came in, they won that first game of the series, and then the next 4, the Golden Knights won. And it was like, that was the top team, one of the top teams in the entire league, in the regular season, and then all of a sudden this expansion team comes in. It was almost like embarrassing.
Right. You just 4-1 them and call it a day.
Yeah.
So what is the, I guess, I don't know how to say it. I guess we're talking hockey strategy at this point. How do they work? Are they a team that, and maybe here within this question, you can introduce me to hockey strategy, how teams are built. Are they you talked about the goaltending. Are they a team that doesn't really score too much? They just take advantage of the couple chances they get and play really good defense. Is that how they're built? Are they a team that's very balanced? How does the hockey strategy maybe work from Vegas? And then maybe kind of go into detail like about what is the nature of hockey teams? I guess the different, in other sports you have teams that can score. You have teams that are going to play good defense and be hard to score against. So how does that kind of work within hockey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, the NHL, if you look at it, it's more of like a copycat sort of league where whoever won the Stanley Cup, then other teams sort of try to model their teams after that. Like with the Penguins being, back-to-back Stanley Cup champs in the past 2 years, everyone sort of took a good look at them. And, I mean, obviously you can't just, pull a Sidney Crosby out of nowhere. That's a huge part with Malkin. They have some crazy superstars. But they're also a very fast team. I mean, speed is like a huge asset for them. And they use that to completely get around their opponents and knock on their heels a little bit, where they're not really like a physical team. Like they're not pushing people around too much, but they're so fast that they can get right around you and score some goals. And they've had really good goaltending too to back that up. And so even when they do, maybe pinch on D and have a little bit of a lapse in defense, then they have a goalie who can bail them out if need be. And so that is a huge strategy, of course.
Gotcha. Very huge. So who, outside of Fleury, right, the goalkeeper, who are kind of the stars for Vegas that are kind of also helping lead the way? It can't just be one goalkeeper. Somebody's got to score goals if you're going to beat the best team in the NHL 4-1. Who are kind of the standout guys and what make them special?
Yeah, so William Karlsson is definitely a guy that's been huge for them. I have stats here actually. In the regular season, he had 82 games played and 43 goals and 35 assists for 78 points, and that's almost a point a game average, which is pretty crazy.
Right, and for hockey, I do know this, right? Assists count as points for your stat record, right? Assist and goals. Do goals count for any extra points? Is it like 2 points for a goal, 1 point for assist, or just you getting a goal and assist, or you're getting points?
Yeah, it's just 1 point each. 1 point for a goal, 1 point for an assist.
Right, and those points don't matter for the actual score of the game. It's just for a statistical standpoint. Just keeping guys credit.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha.
Yeah, pretty much.
I've heard some crazy stuff about like if you only took his assist, Wayne Gretzky would still be the highest point scorer of all time, or something like that. Like something crazy about
Wayne Gretzky's stats and sort of try to, I guess, fit them to today's league.
Right.
And which it's a whole process. Yeah, and Wayne Gretzky was obviously amazing.
Is there something – so whenever, there's always this greatest of all time argument, and I don't think hockey has anybody close to touching Wayne Gretzky. That's one of the ones that's real solidified. Golf, you got, Tiger and Jack Nicholson and Arnold. And one of the big ones that I see compared is like NASCAR. And, Richard Petty, Dale Earnhardt, those guys are legends. But Richard Petty has this thing, 200 wins. And nobody else has got even close. But here's the thing is like at the time, racing was just too easy. The competition wasn't nearly high enough. He had crazy gear. It wasn't really regulated like it is nowadays. So it's a lot harder. Is that the case for Gretzky? Was the game just so different then that he was just able to flourish and get these stats that were just so crazy that they're untouchable? Or is the game pretty much kind of untouched? They're still the same per se, and it's just he was that good.
Yeah. I mean, he was that good, but also the game is totally different now than it used to be.
Got you. Kind of how?
Oh man. I mean,
there's probably a lot. I'd probably hit you,
yeah.
hit you with a sidewinder here.
Equipment has just come so far with sticks. They're using like wood sticks back then, and now they have composite sticks so they can, rip a snapshot like 100 miles per hour. It's insane. So equipment for sure. And then, I mean, they're just faster. And now, I mean, the guys used to be a lot bigger back then too. And I think there's a lot more physical hitting. And so sometimes I know there's guys now like, Brad Marchand, as much as most people really don't like him, he's like 5'7", they call him the little ball of hate. And you can't really hit anyone, but he can skate right past you and put that puck in the net pretty fast. So, right. I mean, guys like that back in Gretzky's day probably wouldn't have even been in the league.
Okay.
Everyone was so big that he would have been crushed. And like, in that old school way of thinking, it was like the little guys who are, even if they're fast, the little guys that wasn't their game. They couldn't really flirt.
Now, I guess athletic build, right? I mean, these hockey guys, they're athletes. Every hockey player I've ever met has always been just this body of muscle. So, I can't say anything to that. I know skating gives us the illusion that they're not as athletic. For us Americans that aren't into the sport. What is the kind of build, I would say, for each position, right? What are you looking for from a build? I remember watching, you probably know his name, some Bruins guy who was just this massively tall guy. I think he played for a long time. What's his name? Huh?
Gara.
Yeah, I remember that. So what is the kind of the build for players on, for – I don't even know the positions. Goalie, defenseman. Was it forwardsman or forward or winger?
There's forwards, and then within the forwards group, there's center, and then 2 wingers. You got a right winger and a left winger.
Gotcha. What for those guys? What is there really a difference in height, weight that people are looking for those guys, or is just kind of like, oh, you're just happen to have this skill set, so you're going to play this position?
Yeah, I mean, it's changing a little bit now, but typically guys on defense are going to be like your big enforcers. They're going to be above like 6'2" and like 230 and up. Okay. So like those big guys, because they got to hold the fort down and maybe lay some checks and sort of get their body in the way of the puck and blocking shots.
Big wide guys.
Usually want a bigger guy there. And even in goal, in net, it's like a lot of guys who like I keep going back to the Penguins because that's the hometown team, but like Matt Murray, he's like probably 100 pounds, but he's super tall and just like has the ability to make some big saves and sort of take up some space in the net despite being so skinny.
Make himself wide.
So, yeah, it's almost like you would think that goaltenders who are smaller might be quicker. Right. But then there's guys also who are, big and they can take up a lot of space in net and not, have a lot of pucks through them and still be able to make some crazy saves.
Right. I've always kind of thought goalkeeping was more reflexes and positioning, like hockey IQ. Versus just kind of brute ability. I think you just have to position yourself and be aware of stuff going on. Because the ability to get behind you. I've never had to play a sport where you had to like defend a goal.
Yeah. Oh,
you
the
know,
flexibility that those guys have is crazy. I mean, they work on it all the time. I think they do like yoga and all sorts of stuff because they got to be flexible to make some of the insane saves.
Okay. This is a question that came from my grandfather. I've been working with him a lot up in the Pennsylvania area, and I told him that I was having you on the show to come on and school me. And he said, I don't want to say it in his voice. But he's like, what the hell is icing? I guess he's tried to watch hockey. Now, I'll give you what I thought icing is. As far as I know, you know, there's the blue lines on the court that split the rink, right? They split the rink into thirds per se, and icing is when actually, I don't even know. I think that's offsides that I'm thinking of. Offsides is whenever you can't pass the blue line until the puck does, correct?
Yeah, you have to clear the zone and everything. No, icing is more of the red lines than the blue lines.
Okay, so see, I'm glad I caught myself and said offsides before I go into this big old thing of the wrong. So what is icing? What constitutes it being called?
Yeah, so icing is more just it's so you can't just throw the puck down into the other end and double change. It's if it goes past two of the red lines, then it's icing. So the red line, there's a red line at the center of the rink, and then there's one down by the nets.
Okay.
And so if it goes past both lines, then it's icing, and it has the face-off end going back down.
Oh, okay. So it's a penalty for trying to clear out. Is that more of a trying to get yourself bailed out of a bad situation? That's what I would imagine would come in is like, all right, well, the puck's in here. Maybe we're a man down and with a power play, right, situation. You just want to clear the puck out. But if you do that, you'd be penalized and you're right back down with the puck. Is that kind of what it's what the rule stops per se is clearing that, or maybe lineup changes? Maybe you're stuck in a bad lineup and you're trying to clear.
It's more just as like a delay of game type thing where they don't just keep throwing the puck down and have to keep chasing it and bring it back. And so you can get a line change in. But on the power play, if your team is down, then you can ice, and it's okay. So at that point, if
you can
with one man down, you can ice the puck because you kind of have to, because otherwise the puck would be in your zone the entire time, and it's almost guaranteed a goal.
Interesting. I did not know that, so I'm learning. This is what we're on here for. Okay, so back to the offsides, the rule that I had thought icing was for a second there, so I had a question prepared for that. Once again, what is that rule meant to stop? My inclination, once again, is that it's trying to stop people from cherry picking per se, and trying to keep the play, play around the puck. So is that kind of what it's built on, or? Yeah,
just like soccer, right? It's cherry picking, totally. That's what it's, because you don't want a guy to, hang out at the other end of the rink while play's going on at the other side and receive a pass and put it right in. That's not fair. So that's why you got to, clear the zone when the puck leaves like one zone, then you got to get all your guys back out before you can bring it back in, or else you're offsides. Got you.
Okay. I think that's all I had for rules. I mean, obviously big penalties are normally, a face-off within the other team's end. And then for personal fouls and stuff like that, it's the timing, right? You're in a penalty box for X amount of time, the power play. That's crazy. That whole concept to me is I think it's really well done. Having to play a man down for certain injuries instead of ejecting guys unless it gets really bad. Just imagine forcing the football team to play a man down. So tonight, here in about 3 minutes ago, Game 7 of the East Finals is kicking off here. That is the Washington Capitals versus the Tampa Bay Lightning. Some guys I'm in a band with are actually at the game right now. I think so. Is this in DC? They may have gone to the other one. Or is it in Tampa?
I think it's in DC. It should be.
Who knows? Okay, so what are your thoughts on this game? Who do you have winning? It's Game 7. So winner goes on to face the Vegas Golden Knights, like we were talking about. And then after telling me who you think is going to win or why, per se, maybe recap that series a little bit if you've watched it. Tell me what team you think is the best matchup for the Vegas Golden Knights.
Yeah. So that's two different answers then.
Right.
Because I think the Tampa Bay Lightning will win this.
Okay.
Will win the series, and in part because the Caps have had such bad luck. It hurts, they can't seem to get out of the second round, through the second round. So I do think, Tampa Bay went up in the series and they had a chance to close out in Game 6. And I fully expected the Caps to come back and win that and push a Game 7 because, you got to be desperate at that point.
Right.
But I do think Tampa's probably the better team, and they're going to end up winning this Game 7. But in terms of who would be the better matchup for the Golden Knights in the Stanley Cup Finals, I think that that's the Capitals. And believe it or not, my reasoning for that is because of Tom Wilson.
Okay, tell me about Tom Wilson.
Okay, so Tom Wilson, a lot of people don't really like it because, if they're not Caps fans, they don't like him because he's this big guy who is real physical and likes to lay some dirty hits every now and then. Okay. And got suspended for it in the series with Pittsburgh for a game or two.
Wait, that's the guy that I think I saw a tweet. I think I was going through some of your tweets. I guess he hit Sidney. Is that what happened? And everybody
it really, but yeah, I'm sure I tweeted about it. Most of Pittsburgh did.
Right. Gotcha.
Yeah, we don't like Tom Wilson, but it's because he makes it hard to play against the Capitals. Right. And yeah, he throws some dirty hits every now and then. That's for sure. But I think Vegas will have a bit of a harder time with them because of that. Because if you look at the series that Vegas has played in, there hasn't been a lot of stuff like that. Not a lot of after the whistle, shenanigans or anything.
Right, setting the tone.
Yeah, and so I do think that Tom Wilson could potentially pose a threat to that and sort of disrupt their game a little bit because Vegas is very fast. They're a quick team. And when you have a guy like Tom Wilson just laying hits left and right, it's going to get them off their game a little bit, maybe get them mad, and maybe have them take some bad penalties.
Right. If not an injury,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Or take a guy out completely. Exactly. Right. So I think the Caps would have a bit of a better chance because I don't think Tampa Bay, looking at their roster, really has a guy that's like a Tom Wilson. They don't really have someone like that.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Very interesting. So you have Tampa Bay winning, but Washington Capitals. I don't know. Is there not there's a big thing in some of these other sports where we're talking about if you can't win at home, winning at home winning away games is the big thing. So, I really don't have a dog in this fight in terms of picking who wins, but letting up a Game 6 comeback is tough. And then if you have to also play that game in Washington, I feel like, to not have the support, who knows? I don't know anything, so I'm going to try and make a prediction here. I'm really excited to watch the Stanley Cup Finals. Now, last thing I wanted to talk about, you're a Pittsburgh Penguins fan, so Sid the Kid is obvious there. He's been a pretty good guy for a long time. I remember being a lot younger, I think almost in high school when he started playing. Where is he in terms of the all-time? Is he considered the greatest player of this generation? Would Sidney be considered a top 5 player in hockey? And what is special about him? Because I know he's one of the greatest. I've never watched Sid. I've never watched him even play. So what's special about your guys' golden child? And where is he amongst the greats?
Yeah, I think he's going down in history for sure as one of the great ones. But I think what makes him so special is that he not only has ridiculous talent, like raw talent and skills and, hand-eye coordination. It's insane. I don't know if you've seen some highlight reel goals where he's just batting the puck out of air.
Really?
Which is so much harder than it looks. It's like, it's like he's playing baseball and hockey at the same time. And the hand-eye coordination for that is just off the charts.
Okay.
But on top of just having raw skill, he works so hard. He has a work ethic unlike anything I've ever really seen. And when you have, skill and that work ethic together, you're going to get something insane. And that's just kind of the embodiment of Sidney Crosby.
Got you. Just hard work ethic and just pure talent and ability. It's a lot of comparisons to guys like Lionel Messi. Is he undersized at all? I know there's always a big thing about hitting him. Is he just not a bruiser at all? Or is he undersized at all? Or is he just average kind of sized athlete?
Under 6 foot, barely, I think, but he's solid. He's built solid. I wouldn't want to go hit Sidney Crosby for sure. I feel like you kind of bounce off him sometimes, but a lot of times he's just too quick to really get hit and doesn't put himself in a position to get hit. So that's definitely part of it. But yeah, he's solid. So he lays some hits every now and then too. But I think he's more preoccupied with scoring goals and stuff like that than really being physical. Right.
The last time I watched, since you mentioned highlight videos, the last time I watched a highlight video for hockey there was a young man, Austin. I think he had come in. It was like his first game, and he had come in and scored a hat trick. I don't know if you remember that. This might have been a couple years ago. Definitely was in the NHL. I don't know what team he played for. I want to say it was like a blue and white team. But
Austin Matthews?
Austin Matthews. That's what it was. Austin Matthews. Yeah. So is he still on the hype train, or did he kind of fade into mediocrity?
Oh, no, I think he's still on the hype train for sure. I mean, I think he's going to be the captain of the Maple Leafs in the next couple of years.
So he's in Toronto, the Toronto Maple Leafs, learning my teams here slowly.
Yeah, he's Toronto Maple Leafs, and that's, their pride and joy right now.
Okay.
And that's also was sort of the who's better, because so I don't know if you know, Patrick Laine was also in that draft year, and he was also very good, and he ended up going to Winnipeg.
Okay.
And so that's a huge rivalry there with Winnipeg and Toronto, and like, who's better, Laine or Matthews?
Oh, okay, gotcha.
And so people were thinking, oh, well, Laine's got to be better now because he made it farther in the playoffs.
Right, but then you get 4-1 by Vegas, and
yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's like, they're both on the golf course now.
Right. Well, what were you gonna say?
I think Matthews will. I mean, I think Laine is a very good player. He has an amazing shot, but I do think Matthews is going to be the one that comes out ahead of that, and I think he'll have some really good leadership skills, end up doing great things in Toronto.
Got you. Awesome. Well, Hali, thanks you so much for coming on and explaining hockey to me. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you probably got a game to watch and probably report on. So just so you guys remember, she said Tampa Bay. So flame her on Twitter if she's wrong. But thank you so much for coming on the show. Hopefully, especially as we get further into the Stanley Cup, maybe as I start finally watching hockey, I can learn a thing or two, and maybe we can have you back on. Kind of talk a little bit more hockey when I know a little bit more. You have any final thoughts? And within your final thoughts, if you had to pick a team for me to follow that wasn't Pittsburgh, because I'm not going to hop on the train. I'm not going to hop on the former champ. Give me a team to follow, and then tell me why I'm following that team. And then that is going to be my hockey team from here on out, buying jerseys and merchandise and fat heads, doing the whole nine.
There's power here. Well, my second favorite team is the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Toronto Maple Leafs. And we've already talked about that, man.
Yeah. I have a Matthews jersey. I don't know if you can see it right
Is that it right there? I was thinking that is, blue and white. That's what I was thinking. And that's probably why I was just like, what's going on? So am I going to be a Toronto? First off, I need to figure out where Toronto is located on the map.
Yeah, that's actually close to Erie. It's like right. It's above us and east.
Okay, it's more of an East Coast side.
Sort of.
Got you. All right, and outside of Austin Matthews, why is it your second favorite team? Why am I going to be a Toronto Maple Leafs fan?
Well, personally for me, I mean, I grew up close to the border there, and I have family in Canada, and so I have a cottage up in the Muskoka area, and so we go up there every summer, and so we always pass through the GTA, or the Greater Toronto area. And there's Leafs stuff everywhere there. And so from when I was little, I sort of became a Leafs fan because of that. I had my Leafs shirts and just sort of started following them. And it was painful to follow them for a while.
Really?
They were not good. They were not a good team for a long time. And that's why everyone, I think, was so excited when they ended up getting Matthews. And I mean, they have Mitch Marner. They have some great players now. And so I think they're really going to, be an up and coming team. So that's why I think if you hop on the hype train now with Toronto, then you'll save yourself some heartbreak, because I think they're on a good trajectory. They're on the right path right now.
Got you. And then I can't be – I'm in that sweet spot where I can't be blasted for being a bandwagon. So perfect. Well, thank you once again for coming on the show. It was awesome to learn and kind of hear from your experiences and get some questions answered. I'll make sure to let my grandfather know about icing tomorrow when I see him. So appreciate you coming on. Everybody, I hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. If you guys are hockey fans, feel free to drop some comments below on your knowledge and your answer to some questions and who you guys think is going to win between the Washington Capitals and the Tampa Bay Lightning. This is Finn from the Mikasa Sukasa podcast, and we're out.